DockerCon 2023 live
Hello,
from Los Angeles. I'm Nirmal. This is
Bret, and this is DockerCon, and we're
Docker
in the
Harbor.
Docker Harbor. So, yeah.
Go ahead.
Well, in case you're not watching this live, DockerCon was today. If you are watching this live, welcome. This is the last day of DockerCon. We've been here 3 days,
Yes.
and we had Captain's Day, day 0, which was also workshop day.
It was great to see a lot of the Docker captains we haven't met in person yet.
Yep.
New Docker captains, and a bunch of the folks that we haven't seen in person since 2019.
Yeah, especially the international friends. Like you and I
Yes.
might have seen each other at a conference, or like a KubeCon NA last year or something. But Docker likes to bring all the captains in and a lot of their employees, so all the engineers are here. It's been great.
Yeah.
It's been a little bit of a reunion,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
and we're not really in the vendor area. We're kind of in just the chill vibe hangout area.
This is like the space where people can relax and take a beat. We found a nice spot here where we're going to kind of go through a little bit of the things that we heard over the last few days here at DockerCon. Where should we start?
Well, first rule is, since we're live, we're here for you. So ask your questions.
Yeah.
Did you know that DockerCon was happening? So there's a bunch of unlike other conferences, maybe like KubeCon or whatever, Docker tends to have a lot of reveals and announcements.
Absolutely.
So there is actually things to talk about, and we have a long list. It's a lot.
It is.
We were actually studying the press releases and the slides because there's so much
Correct.
going on that we could,
And
each one of these could be its own
And
episode.
that's traditional of the DockerCons
Right.
in the past.
Right.
Where, and we are going to talk a little bit about some of those one more things that we
Yeah.
saw today.
Yeah.
And the announcements yesterday and today. So if you have any questions for us about what's going on at DockerCon, what we've been seeing here, what people are talking about, feel free to post that into the chat.
Yep.
We're here live watching the chat. And what should we start talking about? We want to start with day yesterday?
I'm going to actually, while we're talking, I'm going to pull this up.
Yeah.
Oh wait, maybe we'll move this ahead. I'm looking at the
We're doing
feed.
the live. We're doing the
Doing it
live.
live. I'm watching the live feed here, and we're a little far away.
There we go.
All right, so first up let's just talk about the event itself. So Docker hasn't had a physical DockerCon since
person.
2019.
In person, yes.
Yeah, in person. Yeah, we've had
The
virtual
ones
DockerCons
do exist
for years.
in physical space as well, but they're not in person.
Yeah, mostly I would debate that. It's like it's using a different camera for the live stream. We did all this testing, and then
That's how it works.
so this is the first DockerCon since what we used to call this, what we do call the split. So in 2019, Docker sold their enterprise business to Mirantis and started to go back to their origins and focus on developer tooling, which was definitely true today. Like everything we saw was focused on the developer, focused on build, push, a little bit of run, but that usually means like running locally. Like they don't. Newsflash. Docker doesn't focus on clusters anymore, right? They're not they're not trying to build a Kubernetes competitor or trying to build their own private cloud or anything like that. And that was a lot of experimentation in the early years that you and I got started.
Absolutely, yeah. It was about container orchestration, more of that kind of focus.
Yeah.
This is, from that pivot in 2019, this is definitely around the developer experience. And I think one phrase that I heard quite frequently this past few days is a real focus on the before a pull request.
Yeah.
The pre-PR phase of development was highlighted with the new features around Docker Scout and Docker Assistant. I don't know, don't remember exactly the name of it, but some of the features around this idea of, I think they called it inner loop. That development cycle that you have before you send in a pull request and trigger the rest of your continuous integration, continuous deployment system. So that was a heavy focus on that developer experience locally while you're just figuring out what your application's doing, what you need to what you need to create, and then helping tighten that development cycle, which has been a gap traditionally with respect to development for a while now, especially with these, like in the Kubernetes world, you have to do development and you have to figure out some way to do integration testing in some environment somewhere, either locally or on some kind of test cluster. And that cycle has been tends to be quite long as more and more microservices are being created. So it was kind of interesting to see that being highlighted, that gap of that pre-pull request phase of development.
Yeah, although there are some things that Docker created this week or announced this week that do relate to pull requests. So
yes.
The first thing I think we want to talk about is Docker Scout. And now Docker Scout was not announced today, it just went GA today. Mm-hmm. So they've been testing it for a while. I've been using it heavily for a while because it's in my sweet spot where I love to be right now, which is focused on...
What is your sweet spot?
My sweet spot is after you make the commit, right? So the things that happen in your CI, the automation, the CVE scanning, the security stuff before you go to production. And the last year, a couple years, I've been focusing on that area because it's nebulous. There's 1,000 choices. It's hard. There's at least 5 or 6 CVE scanners. There's 1,000 CI solutions. Like it's tough for teams to make a choice, and every team has this completely different pipeline of tooling and where are they doing it? Are they doing it in the cloud? Are they doing and that creates frustration because
it's
you
like
can't...
a lot of security noise.
Yeah, and you can't just go from one team to the next and get it, right? Like if you tell someone, oh, we're Node.js and we develop in containers and we ship in containers, you can probably assume they've got Docker Desktop, they've got a Docker file, they have this, they build images probably somewhere in the cloud in their registry or on their CI. You can presume a lot of that, but then after that, how do you test? How do you scan? How do you check security? How do you,
I think what's interesting is, over the last few years, there's been a push of DevSecOps, right? Moving security to the left, moving it closer to that inner loop of that development cycle.
Right.
And that's great, like moving security awareness, vulnerability scanning, understanding how to secure applications more earlier in your development lifecycle, I think is in general a good thing. But now we're kind of seeing, do we expect our developers to be security experts? Because that's kind of the implied part of the DevSecOps, moving security left.
They can make decisions on security.
They can make decisions and they can understand what that information means and how to take action on that.
Yeah.
And so I think we're kind of seeing the rationalization of that noise. Like we've successfully now created tools that do that, closer, more on the left of the development cycle.
Yeah.
But now it's like, is that too much information? Like, is that even actionable?
Yeah.
And so I haven't played around with Docker Scout. What is it? Why should I care?
Yeah, it's a suite of features all focused around vulnerability discovery and management, and then on the last part is recommendations for actions, right? Yeah. And I think that's the piece that it makes it pretty unique, especially considering it's not another security company that you then have to sort of bolt on your existing tooling. They're building it into Docker Desktop, into Docker Hub, and they even have a GitHub action, so you can, if you're using GitHub, you can very easily tie this thing all the way through. It's not going to affect production yet because Docker doesn't do clusters, so it's not like, but I can see that, I'm predicting that maybe in the future.
It doesn't affect production in the sense that that container is going to, like some version of that container is going to be running in production at some point.
Yeah.
And understanding the changes along that path and that journey is kind of the focus there, right? And the actionable information more upfront into that left part of that development cycle.
So you could just say it's a fancy CVE scanner for vulnerabilities of your Docker images. That's like, but that's not giving it. But that's not giving it all the credit for the things that it does that are unique. One specific thing that I like about Docker Scout. Okay, so step one is it's now built into the Docker CLI, so you can type just Docker Scout, and then you get all these subcommands, and it's not a separate tool. It's in Docker. It's kept up to date by Docker Desktop, and it will let you run things like a scan on an image that you have locally, or one in Docker Hub or any other registry. And that's common, right? All the other CVE scanners can do that. Mm-hmm. Then, but what I like about that feature, particularly about Scout, that I actually have asked some of the other scanners to do, is it has something called Quick View. So if you type Docker Scout Quick View and then the image name, it doesn't dump 100 pages of all the vulnerabilities and all the information in a spreadsheet format and all that. It gives you just like a block of
Don't
text.
be hating on spreadsheets.
Well, spreadsheets in my CLI are not my favorite thing. But it gives you the quick view option because it has other commands, other subcommands, and they all work like Docker. So you can type Docker scout help and -- help, and you can get all that list of features. But the quick view, I can see that other scanners could actually pivot and add this in now that Docker has it. So it's colorized. It's a summary of the different CVEs that you have in the image by high, critical, high, low, medium, that kind of thing, and it colorizes them. And then it will actually show you that count for the base image that you're coming from, so that you can immediately go,
is it me?
Is it me or is it you? Yeah. And
is it me or is it the base?
And then the next thing it does that I think is really what they're highlighting is it then makes a recommendation and says, you're actually a patch level behind on your base image. If you changed it to this other updated image, this is what it would be. So then you instantly can see
it's actionable.
Yeah, it helps me make a decision without me having to go do a bunch of research, right? And it's all because Docker Hub has all these official images, so it can see a lot of the other. It sees a lot of the other images and can make decisions about your base and understands that the base is related to other versions of that base and the Zimver, and it's pretty slick. And of course, all that information that if you're on the Docker subscription plan, you get some. I think there's like the free version of Docker Scout gives you 3 Docker Hub repositories, and it will continually to scan all those images. So that I think what it's doing in the background is when you type the commands locally, I don't know this for a fact yet, but I've been trying to find out how this works with the team. If it already has scans in Hub, you don't have to scan it locally. So if it's like, it'll pull the stuff from the Scout API so that you don't have to rescan every image locally. And some of the other scanners do that too. That's not a relatively uncommon thing. But it definitely has an understanding and relationship between it and Docker Hub. So if you go to Docker Hub, you will start to see some of the Scout stuff there now, kind of coming into the interface. But then you can go to a whole different website, scout.docker.com, which is you could call it like a security dashboard. So it will actually give you a holistic view of your organization and all the vulnerabilities. And that's what starts to make it differentiate from the open source scanners and be more like the commercial scanners out there, where it has the portal, the team can react to things in the portal. But Docker has the advantage here because now they already have Docker Desktop, so they have a GUI on your machine that you don't have to use the CLI. And they haven't. I think there's some stuff coming. I don't know for a fact, but I can see the idea of Docker Desktop could be my view of my organization without having to go to. And because that's what developers don't want to go to the security website, right? They want to just be local tooling.
They want to have the least amount of context switching to get the information they need.
Right, and if you open up, I'm actually opening up here on the Docker Desktop now, we're starting to see some of those vulnerability statistics in the Docker Desktop client without, so if I go in here.
Oh, there it is right there. Y'all can't see this.
Yeah, you can't see. Unfortunately, we can't share a screen because we're on the I could share you the screen on the iPhone, but this doesn't yet work on iPhone.
You've pulled up Docker Desktop and you've clicked on a specific image, container image, and it automatically pulls up a list of the vulnerabilities.
Right. Without an
image.
extension. Without an extension.
There we go.
So
we do have a question.
Okay.
About this, so
let's do it.
Let's do that question real quick, and then.
Yeah. All right, OnSecu's asking, that's something I have been wondering. What is your opinion on CVE tools for production so you know about all CVEs running in your cluster? So, interesting question. I think that's honestly one of the pinnacles of analysis is I can see all the images in my registry, but what's actually still in production?
Yeah, that delta, there's lots of different tools out there that do real-time runtime monitoring of your containers and gives you the version of what's running. And then if it's hooked into your registry or some other repository with the information of what the latest version you should be running, then those tools can make those make that report or analysis for you.
Yeah.
However, I don't know if I don't know if I have like a direct recommendation, but there's a bunch out there.
Yeah.
Right?
So, but first, I would say that Scout, with Scout, not I'm going to start sounding like a marketing team member of the Scout team, but Scout may solve this for us. So,
but it only knows. I might be wrong about this, but it only knows of the vulnerabilities of the images in the repo, in the registry.
Yes.
That
There
not
are
necessarily what's running on
I
the
know.
cluster.
Hear me out. Hear me out.
All right.
All right. There's other things that we haven't talked about with Scout yet.
Okay.
Okay. So I've had conversations. I'm pretty sure it's all public. So if we don't have it yet, the team is definitely thinking about how can we be aware of what's in production. Today, what I know you can do is, for example, if you're using GitHub Actions, and this isn't exclusive to GitHub Actions, but for now they're starting with GitHub Actions. So there's an action called the Docker Scout action. One of the unique things about this is that it knows what images are in your Docker Hub from GitHub.
Right.
And so imagine you're doing a PR. So we were talking earlier about like we stop at the PR. Well, Scout works in a PR. So it will give you the scan results in your PR and then compares to the image you're going to merge to. And it is aware, I don't exactly know how it's aware, but it's aware of what images your main branch are building. And because so
it's doing some correlation between the image
image now and the image, yeah.
And your repo.
And the answer is the question, am I going to add vulnerabilities or remove vulnerabilities with this PR to my main branch? So we could argue that, at least in a simplistic way, that it's very likely that whatever images you're building, whatever tags you're using in your main branches, your default branches, are likely the ones you have in production. Then you get that correlation, and there's something to do with the latest. I mean, they give the example of the demos of latest, and obviously we all shouldn't be using latest in production, but like, I've had so many conversations on this, and they go back for the last year, because they were beta testing it with captains and some of their customers and stuff. And so I've seen stuff that makes me think that it doesn't necessarily require us to have a scanner on the cluster.
Yeah, and another way to think about it is if you're using something like GitOps, right? That's updating your repository as the source of truth of what's in theory running on the cluster. Then you could compare the image version in the registry to the image version that's in your, Helm chart or something like that.
Okay. Sorry, I'm sorry.
Helm chart or something.
Yeah.
And that technically, you still have like Argo or Flux or something running, but that information is not necessarily coming from like a runtime security tool.
Okay, here we go. This is what I'm talking about. This is the thing that I didn't get to play with before.
Again, something you can't see, unfortunately.
So scout.docker.com, it allows me to define environments. And that gives us the awareness of which tags and which things matter. So it says like detect running images in my environment, environment monitoring, in GitHub Actions, sysdig, Docker Desktop, and then there's integrations coming. So we're probably not far away from like a Kubernetes API extension or something like that. So and that talks back to the Scout dashboard. So I think by the end of the year, we're going to have this ability where I can see, it's the complete circle to me for vulnerability management. I can see it on my local machine, I can run them manually, or I can look in Docker Desktop at the images I have pulled down. And because Docker Desktop now allows you to see Hub and even Artifactory and like JFrog stuff, you can see that stuff in Docker Desktop. It's going to plug in there. Then you're going to have Scout, the web dashboard, where you can see like the default dashboard on here shows me all the latest images, and it gives me percentages of my base images that are up to date, how many critical vulnerabilities do I have across my organization. Of what's in the registry. And then we have the GitHub Action, which would allow us to know what the developers are focused on their PRs and you could probably go in there and set, well, I know you can do this, but you can go in there and say, this PR can't be merged. Put in a blocking rule that says you can't be merged unless there's no critical or high vulnerabilities
or you're like
in my scan.
Not introducing more.
Right. No, the count doesn't go up. I don't know if that's actually an option, but I'm going to be spending some time with Scout later this year in the GitHub Action, because I already have a GitHub Action course that I teach. This is exactly, I use all the other GitHub. This
is a great use case
this
for
is another tool from Docker, because Docker already has 6 GitHub Actions. This is now the 7th. So much of my CI is now just straight up Docker tooling. and I teach this in a course, shameless plug. And then if the environment thing allows us to have plugins to actually go to clusters and find out what's actually running, I mean, that's it. That's the dream, right? That's the dream. And then the only excuse you have for why you have vulnerabilities is you haven't changed base images or whatever the reason.
You exist on the internet.
Right. You don't have, like, ignorance is an excuse at that point, right? You have all the data, you now have to make decisions. And that's where the recommendation engine is pretty slick, where it tells you what, maybe you should change this base image, or there's a newer version of some of the things you have or whatever. Like, it's got more intelligence in the recommendations than just your image is out of date.
Yeah, interesting.
Anyway, we could talk about Scout for a whole episode.
Yeah,
so.
like, we're crunching through this.
Oh, by the way, it creates SBOMs. It makes SBOMs in Docker Scout. So
SBOM being a software bill of material.
Yes.
Something that we're seeing a lot of, or an increase in regulation around.
Yeah, in the United States especially.
Yeah, and one of those that compliance and regulation is to organizations are required to have a software bill of materials for their applications, their third-party tools, their everything. Right?
Yeah.
And so there's a lot of interest in tooling that can automatically create software bill of materials in certain formats, right? Back to your Excel sheet.
Yeah.
Or your spreadsheet, right? So.
Oh no, here we go. Okay, I've totally missed it. So there's all these integrations for so OnSecure asked a question, can I specify tags or whatever that it can follow? But when you look at the page on scout.docker.com with the integrations, you get all, if you say all, you get, there's already Jenkins, Circle CI, GitLab, Azure, Amazon ECR rather, JFrog Artifactory, Azure DevOps pipelines, and these are done on day one. Like, this is what we have today. So,
so that would be the recommendation, is to check out, what's the URL?
Scout.docker.com.
There we go.
Okay.
We can put that in the chat real quick.
Scout.docker.com. Yeah. I'll do this.
Shall we keep moving forward on some of these other topics?
Oh wait, yeah. Don't go to my org. Although, well, there is a public aspect to this because it is part of Docker Hub. So you can, like for example, if you go to my Docker Hub to download my course images, you will see the Docker Scout results in Docker Hub of all my images. And you can realize that, I'm not zero CVEs because I'm not using chain guard images.
Always check your base images.
Always check your base.
Know what you're pulling from.
Always, no wait, never.
Always check your pulls?
Wait, always. Okay, next one's you. Next gen Docker build. Tell me about it.
So next gen Docker build, they demonstrated that local builds can take some time, and it's dependent on the hardware and bandwidth and other factors that are
not always great
in your environment, your local environment. And next gen Docker builds does something behind the scenes where it stands up a cloud-based build environment.
Docker's cloud, Docker Hub.
Something somewhere.
Build. I don't know if it's build.docker.com or whatever, but
and then build your image there seamlessly.
So
the user experience for it does not change, and but the build itself is a lot faster because the resources to build that Docker image is now in a cloud somewhere.
Yeah. And if you're in Docker Desktop today, if you have the latest version of Docker Desktop, you may have noticed there's a new option called Builders. And
are you a builder?
I am a builder, maybe.
Yes.
Is that a good? Yes. Yes. I'm a builder. And so for the longest time with BuildKit, we've been able to use the Docker buildx command to manage builders, but those of us
those were like CPU architecture.
And you could make them yourselves. All it requires is a Docker engine somewhere. So you technically could have done this before on your own hardware, where you change Docker context and you build on a remote builder. But it actually required so much expertise and knowledge of how Docker works that I don't know anyone that's doing it. Right? Like I think it's cool, but I don't know anyone that's doing it.
And it can get tricky linking that back to the rest of your.
You have to have access to the Docker engine, and is that secure? Do you use SSH? Do you use the Docker TCP port? So the code name was Hydro Build, which fantastic name. I really wish they would have kept that name. I love that. That it was Moby you know the hydro ships that like float above the water. I don't know what they're called. Hydrofoils.
Yes.
Did you see that logo on screen? So during the keynote yesterday, they had Moby with the hydrofoils on him, and he was going through the water, and it was fantastic. I love that image. I love that image. I mean, I need that image in my life. It's fantastic. I need that graphic. But they're calling it next gen Docker build, and basically what it is remote Docker builds that are seamless, so that you never know.
Yeah.
You don't.
And they were. I think it was a
Mastodon.
It was a build of
Mastodon,
and it was locally. It was like, I don't know,
It was over 2 hours to do the Docker build for Mastodon.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
And then on the cloud, it was
like 2 minutes or
yeah,
something. Yeah,
it was.
Yeah.
It was a
order of magnitude.
Order of magnitude difference between the build speeds.
Yeah, they actually have a graphic, I think, somewhere here that.
Some percentage to speed up. Oh yeah, 39x.
39 times, X speed.
Speed up.
One of the things that's, and shout out to the Depot team, maybe they'll see this video, but Depot.dev was on my show last year. I don't think you were around yet, but they basically.
I existed in your life.
They released this first. Like, they did this first. They're a Y Combinator startup. They sort of, to me, they blazed the trail of the idea of let's just make remote building so seamless. And the way they worked was you could do, instead of Docker build, you just did Depot build, and it acted the same way as Docker client. And it shared the cache throughout your team. So if you built something and then I built it later, I could reuse your cache. It was great.
I think I remember that. Some of those demos.
And they're still around. But if you're on Docker Hub and you have a Docker Hub plan, I don't know if it's going to be a part of the Docker subscription or if it's going to be an extra subscription. I got a feeling it's going to be extra.
We have to wait a little bit for the details.
Pricing. Yeah, we don't know pricing or whatever. But yeah, so now this is going to be something that's just out of the box with Docker if you're on the Docker desktop. And I'm excited for it because one of the things for me, for just as an example, Jekyll, right? Jekyll's a Ruby-based static website generator, right?
Yep.
And to build that, I have a popular Jekyll server repo. I don't know why. I'm not a Jekyll expert. I just used it for a while and I made an image and then suddenly it got popular. So a lot of people actually, when it breaks, I know because people put in PRs or issues because they're like, this doesn't run. And actually recently last year, someone was complaining about the ARM image, valid complaint, that the ARM image didn't work right. And the problem on GitHub Actions is they don't have ARM runners. Right. Shout out to Alex Ellis, who has his own tool called Actuated that actually gives you ARM runners. Pretty great. But this is cool because you now have a builder that can do multi-platform remotely on native hardware.
And also optimize for whatever is important for your organization.
Yeah.
Right? So like cost, security, your environments, whatnot. So
I don't know if you can host these things yourself. As far as I know, for now, it's a SaaS.
I mean, there is a builder tab, so I would assume at some point there might be some way to add some builders there.
Yeah, well, but you could do that today, but you don't get the thing like the shared cache and all that stuff, because you can technically run BuildX remotely, but it's really, no one's doing it, right? Like no one's doing it. So.
Do we have any questions around this? Let's see.
Yeah, it's not.
Alex's tool is crazy fast.
He benchmarked it on one of our repos from me. Yeah, so one of the challenges too with my Jekyll images is because it has to use QEMU emulation to build the ARM on an Intel CPU, it takes 2 minutes to build the Intel image, and then it's a small image, but it takes sometimes like 9 minutes to build the ARM through QEMU. And I hate waiting 10 minutes. Like, I don't need it. I mean, it builds on my local machine.
That's a significant amount of time difference.
It's like a minute on my local machine because my machine is Mac ARM, and that's fast.
But not everyone has
but then I don't want to. But then if I build the Intel locally, I don't even know if that would work. Like, I haven't tried it yet, but because sometimes those QEMUs don't always work right. They don't build perfectly. So yeah, so that's the thing. So we're calling it next gen Docker build. That's what they're calling it. I say Hydro build. I'm +1 to Hydro build.
So that was that was yesterday, right? Was that?
No,
it was one more.
One more thing from yesterday.
One more thing from yesterday was the
Docker debug. Yeah, you talk about that.
So debugging again. Focus on this the pre-PR maybe environments, or even like wherever your container is running.
They did say something about Kubernetes is coming, so
yeah, I think
not yet.
They were a little bit. They were not sharing many details about
Right.
that part.
They just acknowledged that it was planned.
Yeah, and so the idea here is that there's a Docker debug CLI command, but traditionally when you're trying to debug your container, you would like Docker exec into your container, and then hope that you had the tools,
and you have nothing. Yeah.
right, and you have nothing. Like if you're following good security practices, and you're creating minimal images that have the least amount of stuff on there.
If you're a distroless fan or a chain guard images fan, you don't have a shell, so you're not execing into anything.
So how do you debug? So you do your Docker exec, you get in there and you start to, you want to edit a file or even like search through a log file or something like that, but you don't have any of those tools.
Right.
And then if you want to get those tools, then you would have to
right.
You'd have to like install that package.
You'd have to
modify the container in some way,
yeah.
which could impact. That's a
right.
non-deterministic kind of thing.
And you probably don't have a package manager, which means you have to rebuild an image, and like you just can't do it. You
right.
can't do it unless you have ninja skills where you can like. How
exactly what's
PID and namespace sharing
debugging,
and
so you might not know what's actually going on.
Yeah.
So the idea here is they have this new command, Docker debug, which is doing some magic and using NixOS packages.
Nix packages. Yeah.
Nix packages for common tools, and at runtime, seamlessly allowing you to run those tools executed in your container without modifying like your container.
Your container. Yeah. I'm calling it side load. Like side loading. Or sidecar.
Yeah, I mean there's the idea like of in Kubernetes of like the ephemeral containers for using ephemeral containers for debugging. It seems like a similar kind of concept, but it's very seamless.
Yeah.
And they showed like debugging a container that go Docker exec. There's nothing, no ping, no vim, no Emacs, no anything.
Yeah.
And then going back to your local, not execing into the container, but your local shell environment.
Right.
Running Docker debug command with that tool, with that same command, right? Like vim, open that file or whatnot, and editing the file, looking at the logs, doing ping. Those commands were running in the container,
right?
But the output and your interaction was from your own local Docker CLI shell.
Yeah.
And they showed that that package wasn't on the container. It's not like they're quickly installing it, running it, and
right. It's not on the file system of the container. Correct. It's a different file system.
Yeah.
I guess it's mounted. Dynamically mounted in the container.
I don't know the technical details of how they're doing.
I'm guessing it's namespace sharing, PID sharing.
Something.
Yeah, it's to me it's like what you would do in Kubernetes, where we have the new ephemeral containers.
Correct.
There's an option that I actually talked about in my talk about that no one really ever enables, but you can enable basically process and namespace sharing in your pod so that all the containers can see each other's file systems, they can see each other's processes.
But you have to set that up.
Right, you have to do that ahead of time.
Right.
And that's also not usually some people do in production. Well, one, it's not on by default.
Right.
And if you don't, you expose risk when you let everything see everything in your different containers, and a lot of people don't want to do that. So this is, like, we know what this is going to do for Docker Desktop locally. It'll be interesting to see how this works with Kubernetes. Yeah. And that was wild to me, because I thought, well, they're not going to do Kubernetes because they're not focused on production. But then they just kind of like, oh, one more thing, Kubernetes is coming. So I don't know yet how that's working.
I'm cautiously optimistic about this pattern. It looked really interesting. I think it's an area that a lot of people have been wanting more better tooling around and figuring out what's going on in the container. Do we have a question here?
No. Kyle's here. Hey, what's up, Kyle? From Slim AI, the Slim toolkit also has a debug command. Yeah.
All right. Yeah. So that's
Although also had Slim on our show. So yeah.
Yeah. There we go. Shall we keep moving? So that was the end of.
That was day one.
Yesterday.
Okay.
Let's see. Okay.
Yeah, we're making good time. We're halfway through the hour. We've gotten halfway through DockerCon.
There we go.
Okay.
So then today.
But of course, the keynote today was longer. So I don't know.
Let's go.
You want bottom up?
Yeah,
okay.
yeah. So you want to talk about a little bit about the new things around Docker Compose?
Yeah, these are actually things they they probably barely, they may have mentioned these yesterday. Docker Compose has some new features. I've talked about them, I've got some YouTube shorts on one of them, maybe both of these features. But the first one was Docker Compose Watch, which is similar to a lot of third-party things we've had over the years, like Docker Sync. Some people even use rsync. Basically, instead of bind mounting code, this is for local Docker use, instead of bind mounting code for development, which is convenient but has side effects as well as, especially on Mac, crossing that OS boundary, that's really slow. So people that are in some ecosystems, like especially Node, because I'm in the Node community a little bit, so I know the pain of you do an npm install when you bind mounted, it's going to take a while. Like the performance is across the OS file system calls is super slow. I mean, at the level when you get into it, we're talking about like microseconds difference. But when you have 100,000 files, suddenly it matters.
If you're doing Java like Node, right? It's like
I mean, Node modules is huge. So. Docker Compose Watch is a one-way sync built into Compose that will watch your host file system and then do what you tell it to do based on your file path rules. Right. So you just add this to your Compose file. It's a separate section now for each service it's under Develop, and then you can set up rules. So for my example I did in my talk yesterday, you would make a rule for package JSON and package lock JSON that if they changed, rebuild the image. Right. Just rebuild the image and restart the container automatically, or recreate the container.
It's a nice pattern because that's kind of the pattern of some of like the debugging tools or doing some of these like development loops. Or we're triggering new container builds and things like that. It allows that. It's a little less friction around that now, and I like the granularity of it. It's not like this whole entire file, like folder structure.
Right. The whole.
And if anything,
it's smart. It's a little smart.
Yeah, there's some smarts behind it.
And then you can mistake. So you have two different main rules for now, and there's a whole bunch of ideas about new features. We've already been working. It's all open source, and it's in the Compose repo. And there's a lot of ideas about how to make this better. Like for example, I want one where I can make an option so that when I do a Docker Compose Watch, which is it's kind of like the new up, because it does an up plus a build plus a watch all in that.
The
new up is Docker Compose Watch. Yeah, as far as I'm concerned, once I have that developer section that section of YAML in my Compose file, I'm always going to be typing Docker Compose Watch now. Heads watch.
Heads up.
Heads up. Heads watch. So instead of rebuilding, it just syncs. So you got rebuild or sync. So if I change the source code file, it syncs. If I change a package file, it rebuilds. One of the first things I asked for, and they're already like, yeah, let's figure out how to put that on the list, is I want to be able to do like a Docker Compose Watch -- build or something like that, so that it basically it checks if the image is fresh, like is it on the current code, and if not, sync all the files in. So in other words,
kind of like an inverse of like a single file.
Imagine your workflow of you stopped Docker Compose, your code's already on your host, and then you go and you make an edit later. You didn't have Docker running, and you just edited some code on your host, and then you do a Docker Compose Watch again. I wanted to know that it's out of sync and then sync all. So I wanted to do like an initial sync, and it doesn't do that yet. So I would have to like edit another file. I'd have to edit that file after Compose is watching. Anyway, so they're very excited about it. They're already looking at ways to expand it and add the new features. There's people that are talking about a two-way sync, like if I change files in the container, can you sync them back out? Doesn't exist yet, but the Mutagen team got on stage. Docker bought a third-party tool called Mutagen, which does syncing.
So right now it's only one.
Yeah, it's only into the container.
And then there might be in and out.
It might be. I'm not really exactly sure what the plan is on that. The other thing is it also doesn't hup your container. Like it doesn't, if it pushes the sync files into the container, it doesn't just restart Node or whatever is in your container, because sometimes you need that.
Yeah, and so that's dependent on your server,
what are you running?
Your application.
Right. What are you running in there?
And its ability to understand what has changed.
Yeah, if you're running a Webpack server.
Does it modify like the file descriptors and the metadata of the file to trigger?
No. Not yet, and that's the thing is another feature that I think we will eventually get obviously this is open source. We got to figure out if they're going to want to do that, and if someone else submits a PR.
Right.
But if this catches on, then I would think that a lot of people would want to add all the features that we have in a lot of these other things like Webpack and NodeMon and all the things that are our dev servers. That it will maybe not require for the simpler setups a fancy file watcher in the container. Like for me, if it's Node, my dev container stage doesn't run Node, it runs NodeMon. So NodeMon is watching files in the container. So in this, my watch setup now is Compose is watching files on my host, it will sync them in. Then NodeMon is watching files in the container, it will recognize the change, restart Node.
Right.
So it's a two-step approach, and I'd love to see it to where
just seamless.
It's just a one-step approach, and obviously
not every server, not every application works that way though.
Right. But it would be nice if I could like just start putting like commands, like okay, well if these files change, run this command
like
and
an
then
action that's an action linked to that trigger.
Yeah, like if you use NodeMon, you have a JSON or a YAML file. And in NodeMon, you can do things like, if this directory changes, do a npm build, right? And then restart Node. Like you can basically give it arbitrary commands. Yeah. And it doesn't do all that yet, but that maybe could happen.
Compose Watch, you have all these Docker Compose files
yep.
now. Where are they going?
So thanks for that good lead. Good lead. I feel like we're on stage. Docker Compose publish. So Docker Compose Alpha is where they put all the alpha test stuff,
features, yeah.
And they don't want to put stuff in the Docker Compose command space that they might just take out because it didn't work. So experimental. Docker Compose Alpha Publish is like something I've been asking for 5 years, which is wrap my Compose file in some tarball or an image format, store it in Docker Hub so I can share. I want to share Compose files, not source code.
Yeah.
And a great example is we do Docker workshops. We train people all the time. You're always teaching somebody Docker. That's part of being a captain. And I want them to run, they have Docker installed. I want them to run the voting app, but I don't want them to have to clone a repo, right? Because they're not going to edit the source code. I just want them to run a Compose project. So I can't do that until today. Yeah. Now I can do.
So this is kind of
this is two things actually. Yeah, you can push and then you can pull. So you can run a Compose file from the internet.
In the Kubernetes world, you have something like a Helm chart
Yeah.
repository.
And Kube Control can do the same thing. It can run files from the internet, it can pull files from the internet.
And it's kind of like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Right?
It is like a Helm. It has the potential to be a Helm for Compose.
Yes.
Except for the fact that Helm deploys to clusters, and this only deploys to Compose, right? So it's only a single. But yeah,
obviously, but the equivalent's there, and kind of one of those things. It's like, why wasn't it there? Like,
I wanted it, yeah, and there was always other priorities, and what do we got here?
Thank you, Antonis, for answering questions.
Are you live?
We are live.
Yeah, we're live.
Like and subscribe. Hello. Welcome.
Hello. Welcome.
Tell us who
I'm
you
in
are.
the live now.
Step forward, sir.
Hi.
Introduce
everyone.
yourself.
I'm Francesco, developer advocate at Daily Dev, active on social media, especially Twitter and YouTube.
Yes.
Docker Captain, of course.
And you won the Docker Captain's Tip of the Hat Award this year.
I won. This is why I'm here, literally everywhere. I'm also in the Bret's live, and I really loved the show. Only loved the show. And now I'm in the show.
Now you're in
the
show.
show. Love it.
Forever.
I'll check it later.
Tell us one thing you liked about DockerCon so far, the last 2 days.
I liked the keynote, the announcement, so many things at the same time. So I think we need some time to process all of them because it's crazy. The amount of announcements, like it needs an announcement itself. It's incredible. Like,
it's kind of a content creator's dream because now we've got months.
It is, Bret.
We got months of content.
We will not get bored in the next upcoming months. I'm sure about that. So that's probably favorite part. And also meeting the amazing Bret finally, the first time in person. So.
Well, I got to meet the amazing Francisco. So what's your YouTube channel?
My YouTube channel is Francesco Sciulla. It's easier.
Okay.
And I do stuff also there. Most of them are about Docker. And that's it. So, and I do many live streams. So I was thinking about doing a live stream, but I can just join Bret's one, so it's done.
go.
Subscribe.
Subscribe.
There you go.
I love it. I love that you did that. I love that you did that. That's awesome.
We'll put your links on the chat.
Yeah.
Of course.
Yeah, in the show notes. In the show notes. I'm guessing this is going to make it to a podcast, so you'll be in the podcast as well, and we were talking through all of the.
The announcements.
Oops, wrong button. All the announcements, and
So many.
We're three-quarters of the way.
yeah,
They don't fit in a single page.
no, and I'm pretty sure we're missing stuff.
Yes.
Like there was a lot of press releases that we couldn't get through. There's a big slide deck that I couldn't really understand every little image. We had Docker desktop web GPU.
We'll get to that.
Oh, not yet. Is there something else?
Yeah, we were going.
Oh,
from-
so
we got one more.
Gen AI stack.
Yes.
So, are you into the the llama stuff and the?
Not yet, but probably after this I will go.
Okay.
I will stack a
I
bit
think that's a
more
common
into
answer,
that.
which is
Yeah.
maybe not yet,
Yeah.
but I feel like a lot of us have to start getting to understand these kind of workloads and LLMs and how they're integrating with all the things that
Well,
we're
it was
doing.
hard. Like every time I would look into, it, I'm like, okay, I don't got time for this.
No, it's like it depends. Like how many times you hear it. Like it scales up in the priority. And one day say, okay, now let's see what is that. And you dedicate some hours. So
And our friend Matt Williams over at Infra, they created Olama, and he gave a talk. I didn't get to see it, but I'm going to watch it. Olama makes it easier. I don't know if it's just Mac, but I know on Mac, it makes it easier to run like an LLM server locally and use Hugging Face models.
Use models like different open source models and Olama CPP models. It's a frictionless way of running those LLMs locally.
Yeah.
Right. So we've seen a lot of interest in this when Llama CPP was released earlier, and everyone started racing to figure out how to run these LLMs locally on their Macs and optimizing and changing the features. Olama allows for kind of like single command, quick and easy getting up and running for these LLMs.
Right.
So
now Docker is essentially partnering with them and a bunch of other tools to make it even easier.
I think it was LangChain, Olama, and Neo4j. So Neo4j is a vector database. Olama provides the ability to run the models locally, and then LangChain allows you to integrate different models and do some of the orchestration between your models that you're running and the vector database that you might be, fine-tuning a model or adding another embeddings to your model. So we're seeing the early stages of these kind of new stacks of tools that are combined around GenAI, right, and around these kind of
Is GenAI a term that they made up for today? Is that a term that's already been? Okay.
That's a term.
Okay.
So GenAI is generative AI, right? So some machine learning models that create content.
Because for me, when I hear Gen AI, it's like, well, we had Gen X, and now we have Gen AI. Like, are the robots a new human generation?
I have a feeling that might actually be a name for the next generation at some point.
Gen AI. Yeah, I mean, if you put it on the nightly news.
We're at Gen Z currently, right? So
we are going back to A. So Gen A and Gen AI, two totally different.
In 6 months, this will be a thing, and you will be the first one who said this.
Yeah, and it's on the internet, so it's forever. Right?
You heard it here first, folks. So that's what the Gen AI stack was, and there was some keynote announcements around that. And then the last thing, we're finally there. They did a one more thing, right? So often at DockerCon, they'll do a one more thing, a little preview, a little like. What was it? What was it called back in the day? Like the Moby hacks or there was always like
Moby hacks.
These like little demos of like.
Well, there was at the end.
Yeah.
It was at the end.
The edge
stuff.
Just in general, they would always have like a one more thing.
Yeah.
And so this time around, there was a one more thing, and it was around a potential feature, I guess, in Docker Desktop. We're seeing more of these Gen AI, machine learning workloads. And those require, or are better when you can access the GPU either locally or wherever, right?
Yeah.
And but using containers with GPUs locally on your host is can get really tricky sometimes. You have different CPU architectures, you have different GPUs running, and they showed off one more thing where they were running a WebGPU server. So WebGPU is a framework for, I think it's from Mozilla, that allows you to utilize GPU within like a web framework,
right?
Like kind of like WebGL.
On a Mac. This was on a Mac, by the way.
So they were running the WebGPU server on their Mac, and then in the container they were live injecting new libraries,
a client,
a WebGPU client, into your container that allowed your container to directly use the GPU of the host more easily, with less friction,
right?
Without modifying,
without changing your Docker image.
Correct. Correct. And it was a very quick demo.
Yeah.
And that was like most of the detail that we saw. We'll see if we can potentially post maybe on your newsletter some of the screenshots from the presentation and keynote. Yes.
and one more thing.
And then one more thing.
Yeah, so that one was a really, that one they warned us, it was like pretty early.
There's something that might come later.
Okay.
And then the last AI thing was Docker Assist.
Right.
So the idea here is to have a chatbot-like assistant that helps you with your Docker commands and your Docker files and understand and optimize your usage of Docker and assist you in learning how to use it, what commands to run, etc. And so that is in preview. There was a link to get access to that and check it out and provide feedback. So,
and it reveals itself in VS Code. We don't yet know. We didn't know. I think it's an extra extension. Because there's already the Docker extension.
It should be an extra extension, and you see this on the terminal, on the top of the VS Code extension. They made it very fast, so probably we need to do it again. And basically, this is a tool that uses other tools, other Docker tools. So it's a very good idea.
They're using the notebook feature, the Jupyter.
They were using. I don't know if that was part of the demo. They were using a Jupyter notebook to kind of demonstrate it. I don't know if that was just for demo purposes versus like how you would actually interact with the system.
I was talking with the team yesterday, and for now, the interface is the notebook.
Okay.
Yeah, because it was the easiest way for them to create that Chat GPT-like experience in VS Code. If you're someone who's like me, you're using Copilot with GitHub. They now have a Copilot chat that just is it's like a sidebar, just like your files and all your other stuff. And that works. Like, I actually think I would prefer that experience over what they showed, but they're experimenting and they may iterate.
It's a preview.
Yeah, because the notebook thing doesn't require them to write a whole side experience with a UI and all that. They could just cheat, sort of. But it worked. I mean, it looked great.
Yeah.
I watched it and I was like, I might use this. Like, especially if I didn't know Docker commands. It basically was. It knows compose files, Docker commands, all the things you need to know in the Docker world, and was just.
It also uses the Docker init, so it's kind of up to date.
So it's kind of holding your hand through the Docker experience. And as a trainer, one of the biggest challenges, even with Docker Desktop, is that you still can't do everything in Docker Desktop. You still need the CLI a lot of times. And you still need to know the file formats. And even with a init gets you started, but then you barely understand what you're looking at when you're new. You're like, there's all this stuff. And what does that mean? And what if I change that? And then like they showed a demo on stage where they got an error, and it was because of a command in the Docker file wasn't right.
Yep.
And then the assistant knew, or assist.
And it said, we recommend this change.
Yeah.
And then also it recommended doing like don't forget to do, Docker compose down, or like stop the things that you were running.
It's like your mom's recommendation. Like, don't forget to do Docker.
Please clean up when you're done. Please clean up.
Clean up your
So
room.
that's known as Docker Assist, and I guess we're going to see that in VS Code first. I'm sure that they're going to try
some kind of integration.
Yeah, and it's not a CLI tool. It's just in the UI. So, like, there's no. Because I don't know if you've experimented with some of the CLI helpers, that use ChatGPT or GPT-4 or something like that, but it's not that. It's definitely and it's not in Docker Desktop yet. I mean,
I don't know if it would be.
It uses
it's in the IDE.
Yeah.
Like you may even,
I mean,
you
if
may
it's
even
in
be
a-
able to
if
use
it's in a
other
notebook-
Docker
Yeah,
installs.
but if it's in a notebook, like, could you just run it, like wherever you can run a Jupyter notebook?
Yeah, good question. Good question. Yeah, because I don't understand like.
Like the interface was the Jupyter notebook, so like, does it need anything?
Right, I'm
else
assuming
but
this
that?
LLM is not running locally, so I'm assuming it's calling out to
Maybe,
something in
yeah.
Docker.
We have
We-
to find out more
Stay
details
tuned.
about it.
Probably it's a Jupyter, and then they made it as a VS Code extensions
Yeah.
for developers.
Yeah.
Probably. But
Yeah.
That's a good, I mean, VS Code is a good demo any day of the week. Like if you want to tell a developer to make their lives easier and you show them in VS Code how it makes
Whatever
it easier.
it is, like,
yeah,
it's-
it's fine.
yeah.
Okay, so we got any
All right,
questions?
we got some. So actually, let's
Oh,
go-
Nuno's on. What's
Yeah.
up, Nuno?
No.
So we're almost at the end of our stream here.
Yeah.
So we got one question here. I'm also interested in whether any Docker Swarm people showed up, or if we need to make our own online SwarmCon on Discord.
So,
a good one.
so this is Martin. So as a context, NCQ is in our Discord server, devops.fan. That's our Discord
Yes.
server. 16,000 DevOps people in there, and he helps me corral the
Subscribe.
Swarm group. Like and subscribe. Like and subscribe. And if you didn't know, you get on the newsletter and you'll find all this stuff out. The newsletter links are below. Just scroll down in the description. But on the Discord server, we have a very active Swarm group, including one of the Swarm maintainers. Hello, nearsighted. Bjorn and the Docker Moby team. They're related to the Swarm stuff. And so they're all in there helping people out in Swarm, and it's kind of created this community of people that are using Swarm still in production or for various needs. And we're doing a Swarm fans meetup here at DockerCon in a little bit. So for Martin, it hasn't happened yet. We're going to have a hallway track in like an hour. If you're here at DockerCon and you happen to be watching this and not hanging out physically, I don't know why you're doing that, but at 12:45 here at DockerCon, we're going to have a Swarm fans hallway track, and that will not be live streamed or recorded, but I will be bringing back notes to the Discord server. So to answer his question, yes, we're going to be talking about Swarm later today, seeing if anybody here does Swarm. I've already met people here, besides captains, I've met people that have come up and said, we're using Swarm, we're trying to skip Kubernetes and avoid it and use Swarm only. Just a couple of guys that walked up and started telling me their story, and they learned Swarm from my courses, so they wanted to let me know that they were using my Swarm knowledge in their servers. So we do have Swarm people here. There's obviously there was no Swarm talks, because this is not SwarmCon, and Docker doesn't talk about.
That's on you.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
on you, Brett.
yeah. So
So we're almost at the end of our stream today, and we've got some other Docker captains swarming around us right now. Why don't we close out with? Can you tell us one thing that you would like people to check out that you learned at DockerCon?
From all the things that
From
I've
all the
learned.
things.
So I will start probably with Docker Scout. I think it's like the thing that also they dedicated more time. So
Yeah.
this can be, it's one of the things that might be a game changer, because we know that there are already some solutions, but we will see. We'll see if this will be like something that just maybe just to test it, or this will be like game changing things, so people will use it like in the day-to-day process.
Yeah.
Because now that it's embedded in the CLI, for example, even me, like probably I'll just use it because it's just one command away. So it's easier to use. So probably that's the one. Because of course, now everybody will say AI, but I will start with that one, which I think is more for the production environment, trying to understand what the vulnerabilities are. So it's more practical for a Docker guy, for a Docker person, we can say. So it's more for that. And then of course, you can just play around with AI, but I want to bet on Docker Scout. I want to be unpopular.
So when we're back home, you think for you especially, the first thing you'll look at is Scout?
Yeah, probably Docker Scout and Docker Init.
Okay.
I didn't make
Yeah.
a talk about Docker Scout, so I really knew it, by the way. But yes, so Docker Scout, Docker Init, I want to see also but I think that has already been announced.
Yeah.
And yes, so probably now that it's one command away, I mean, even in a tutorial now, after you build your image, you can say, okay, let's just do Docker Scout of this image. It's easier even when you explain this to someone else. So I think this might be a game changer, even as a content creator, even if you are creating some content about Docker, because it's just one extra command away. That's my idea.
Okay. Okay. What about you?
Well, thank you.
Oh.
I want to bring Antanas on and ask him the same question.
Okay.
Thank
Like
you.
and subscribe.
Did I swarm bomb?
Yes. Thank you.
Thanks, man.
The same question.
Same question. First, introduce yourself.
So I'm Antonis. I'm a Docker captain from Athens, Greece. So yeah, and I have popular friends. That's very important because people on X were jealous of me of being here. So and I like development with Docker. I've been doing this for like almost 8 years in various forms. So I think for me the most interesting thing is the cloud build. So being able to build your images even faster by utilizing both your local environment and remote servers, plus all the casting and all the nice stuff. Actually, I think this has been announced a few years ago, where they were trying to do shared casting between builds, but I think now this time it's going to be made, and I mean the speed up is really huge. So I'm really excited about that.
Cool.
How about you?
So you like speed?
I like speed. I mean, do you prefer staying on your machine, doing nothing? I mean,
Context switching every time you type a Docker build command.
I have to say a secret. So when I'm waiting for Docker to build, I'm watching Bret's and your video. So
There you go. See, now we're gonna get less views on the channel because Docker builds are too fast.
that's sad.
You're gonna have to watch Netflix.
Okay, that's fine. I mean, I can do that. Okay.
Yeah.
Cool.
All right. What about you? What are you gonna do? What's your first thing?
I'm gonna check out a little bit more about WebGPU and figure out what that is, and then
stuff.
and then look at the GenAI stack. We're seeing a lot more. The customers I interact with in my day job, we're seeing a lot more of them interested in LLMs and machine learning, and I think that's going to be a way for me to educate myself more and experiment with these tools. So that's what I'm interested in.
Yeah. All right. So we got AI Builder. I was going to do the Scout GitHub Action. That was going to be my first thing to check out because I love the idea of
GitHub Actions guy.
I do, and I love the idea of PRs telling me if I'm going to make my image more secure or less secure. Because you weren't here, but yeah, they didn't really talk about it in the keynote, I don't think, but. Scout's GitHub Action lets you compare against what you're about to do, what you're about to merge. So you get an actual action, like you said, actionable pass or fail. If this is going to add vulnerabilities, don't let the PR through, right?
It also compares with your latest main build.
Yeah.
So okay, that's pretty good.
You can define it, or it's smart enough in GitHub to actually know what the PR branch is merging to. So it compares, and it knows. It has some intelligence that figures out what image is being built from that place, so it correlates. And I don't know, supposedly this may require you to use Docker Hub as your, because it uses some of the manifest metadata. So.
Yeah.
But I think they have different registries integrated in Docker Scout.
Yes.
So potentially more registries will come in the future. So.
I didn't see GitHub Container Registry in that list, I don't think. Maybe it's probably in there and I'm blind. But.
So folks that are listening, if you would, we would love to have you post in the chat what you are first going to look at of all the things we mentioned on the live stream today. We'd love to know what you're interested in and what you're going to try to look at and kick the tires on. So put that in the chat.
Yeah.
We'd love it. So wrapping up, DockerCon 2023.
It's fun to be back.
Yeah, it's fun to be back. It's great seeing Docker captains we haven't seen in a while and friends and folks since 2019. Some of us haven't seen each other since a while.
Yeah,
and,
like this guy. Yeah.
2019 was 19 or 18 was the last time?
2019.
19.
Yeah.
You were in 19.
Yeah, in San Francisco, right?
Yeah. They were both. There was an 18 and a 19 in San Francisco.
Yeah, I was there.
Yeah. Okay. Well.
Nitro cold brew, you remember?
Yeah. We got Nitro today. Nitro cold brew is our jam. What are we calling it? Docker Nitro? Hashtag Docker Nitro?
Docker Nitro.
Nitro cold brew, people. If you haven't had one, it'll change your life. It'll change your life.
Yes. All right. So when will our audience see us next?
They will see us next week, as usual. And next week, I should have had that ready to go. Please hold. Loading webpage. Next week is you and I doing cloud native Q&A.
Awesome.
So
gives us a chance to
Read some stuff.
not only that, but we can actually do some share screen on some of the things that we talked about right now.
Yeah, somebody commented earlier, "Hey, I love you describing your screen and not showing it.
Excruciating detail.
So fun.
But you're pretty good in describing the screen, so I think it's fine.
Yeah.
So I think
Thank you.
we'll get a
You were
chance to. So bring your questions next week.
Yep.
Of the things that we talked about today, and your cloud native questions, Kubernetes, cloud.
Yeah, so next week's cloud native Q&A, so it's all Q&A, just us hanging out. The week after that is Veritas is going to be on the show with Net Backup, talking about the way they've actually moved their Net Backup product. If you've been a sysadmin, you know Net Backup because they've been around forever, and they've modernized and Kubernetesized their platform. And containerized, thank you.
Cubed it.
Yeah, and they have I don't know if it's a Helm chart or whatever, but we're going to talk all about that in a couple of weeks and how you can get enterprise backups that don't just support Kubernetes, but support everything, and so you can now start including Kubernetes in your backups with all your other backups, which has always been a challenge because we have Kubernetes-specific tools, but you also have other infrastructure that you need to deal with too. So we're going to have them on the show, and then we've got, we're going to be course Q&A, so that's something we do every month. And then we're at KubeCon.
Yes.
So
in person.
And you're at KubeCon.
I will be there.
So we're probably going to do a live show. We're going to be doing this again from KubeCon.
Lessons learned.
Yeah. So I have here. I am KubeCon guest, possible pre-recorded, maybe on live online. It always depends on the.
We can try it.
It always depends on the Wi-Fi. Like today, vote the Wi-Fi for us.
Let us know
thumbs up. Thumbs up means the Wi-Fi was great. If the Wi-Fi sucked, don't thumbs down. You just don't vote.
All right. On that note,
All right.
You can find us on DevOps.fan on the Discord, and we'll see you next week.
Yeah, see you next week. Let me check the chat one last time because.
Yep.
WASM
One
demo
thumbs
was
up.
great. Yeah, Dan's here. He's like, WASM demo was great. Yes, and there was WASM stuff. We totally missed that. There was so much. I know we missed some things that we're gonna turn off the recording, and then we're gonna walk away and go, we forgot such and stuff. We totally spaced out on it.
That's
so thank
okay.
you, Dan. Thank you, Dan.
We can cover it on the next show.
Yeah, we'll be here next week. So we were an hour late today because of the keynote, but if you're gonna want to join next week, it's always the same time, back to our regular schedule, which U.S. Eastern 1 p.m. on Thursday. Yep. So thanks for being here, everybody.
Bye.
Ciao.
Bye-bye.
Actually, you know what? I just realized I don't know how to end this. Oh my God. How do I stop?
DockerCon.
Can't stop the fire. It was always burning and you